My name is John, and this is Please Allow Me. Tonight we sit with Jacob Becraft. He's an M.I.T. synthetic biologist and the CEO and co-founder of the biotech startup Strand Therapeutics. His company develops gene therapies for rapid response vaccines against infectious diseases. He has a PhD in biological engineering, and he's a blue belt in the gentle art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Please welcome Jacob Becraft. JB, what's going on?
What's up, JC?
Same old, my man. So, did you get us a fucking cure for the COVID yet?
So, it's fucked up out there, man. Like, the coronavirus has had me scared since December when it came out, because it's probably the first like highly infectious new virus that we've come across. But I mean, we're working on a vaccine. We're working with the other vaccine partners. I mean, it's vaccine shit is slow too. I mean, we're moving at a record speed right now, but it's still slow.
So when you guys work on a vaccine, what's the process for that? Like, what do you say? Like, oh, here's the COVID. What's the first thing you guys have to do? And who are vaccine partners you work with? Is it all internal? Are you working with some other people? Are you giving like homeless people $15 to stick them in the ass with some weird needle? I mean, what's going on?
Well, like, so the whole, like, really what a vaccine is, right? It's like you have to figure out how to teach the immune system what a virus looks like. It's actually a lot like jiu-jitsu, right? When you have to figure out like what other things are trying to do shit, right? So you got to train the body. And so in order to like show a virus to the body without it getting infected, you have to figure out a way to like impart that into the body. And so that can be done by like taking a bunch of the fucking virus and administering it to a person after you've like killed it so it won't replicate. It can also be done by just like getting a bunch of the virus proteins. And that's what we do now. Like we figure out, we take the virus proteins, or we take gene therapy and we encode the virus proteins on like DNA and we inject that into the person. But like, the FDA is moving fast, but they're still too slow. Like it's obviously still too slow because we're still fucking unable to do shit. We're running a 40,000 person clinical trial instead of like deploying these vaccines across.
And so what slows it down? Is it like the government just like with a system of checks and balances, or is it finances and getting the funding to do it? Or is it just simply like learning more about the virus?
So the biggest thing that slows it down right now, because of some new technology we have, is going to be manufacturing and regulatory approval. So,
were you going to do that in China?
So, the best vaccine on the market right now is actually partnered in China as well. It's a German company that works with Pfizer in the U.S. and Fosun in China. That's BioNTech. They have the number one vaccine, but like...
Don't sell the solution, sell the problem, baby. Marketing 101, those motherfuckers.
It's actually pretty fucking crazy. Like, China kind of was warning the United States actually at the beginning of the year. I don't think they're doing a great job of they're suppressing a lot of information. But they did tell the United States this shit was going on, and the US really, both the biotech industry and the leadership of the country dragged their feet on addressing it. And it's just so fucking frustrating, because you look at like the amount of resources that we're having to plow into the vaccine right now, right? Like BioNTech and Pfizer have gotten billions of dollars, and Novavax has gotten $1.6 billion a couple weeks ago, and Moderna got $500 million a couple of weeks ago to make a vaccine.
From the government?
From the government, from BARDA, which is like an emergency biotech defense agency within the government. And so BARDA and a number of other health agencies, also, everyone knows Dr. Fauci. He runs the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease. They actually partnered with Moderna, which is right across the river here in Cambridge. They're right next to us, my company, and they develop very similar technology. We have better technology, of course, but they develop very similar technology, and they partnered with the government to actually do the clinical trials on their vaccine. But the problem is that there's 3 stages in doing a vaccine. The first one is safety. You do like 40 people, and you show, do these people get fucked up? And then you do like a couple thousand people, and you show, do these people get sick, and do they have do they actually have like antibodies in their body against the virus? And then you have to do a multi-site, like multiple different cities, 40, 50,000 person study, and you have to wait for months to see if people get infected to show if a vaccine is effective. And the big risk there is, just to like say it, is that if you, sometimes with vaccines, you can actually do something to the body called enhancement, which is where instead of making the body train to fight it, you train the body the incorrect way to fight it, and it fucks you up worse.
Gotcha. How does a company like Moderna get in bed with like the FDA to be partners with the government in the vaccine? How does that happen? Is that just strictly a who you know and who you blow type situation? So
like the government has a bunch of the government's been supporting Moderna's company for years. Actually, they've been getting grant. They were started with the same DARPA grant that when I was at MIT, we were on this DARPA grant called Protect, which was to develop these gene therapy viruses. And what Moderna ended up going and doing was getting from the same program, they got about $25 million to develop to develop their technology. They've gotten hundreds of millions since then, before COVID. So they're very well connected, and they had a very well connected board member. But anyone can, we've talked to the U.S. government. I've talked to a number of people in the offices. I talked to local and state governments about both coronavirus responses and what we can do to accelerate these timelines on these therapies. But the problem, or the way that Moderna is actually getting to be a part of this, I think, is actually verging on cronyism. So
cronyism in the U.S. government?
Who would have fucking
thought?
Right?
Shocked.
So the head of the Operation Warp Speed, which Moderna, which is the Trump administration's plan to get a vaccine as fast as possible, they went out and got an older guy who used to be at a company called GSK to run this fucking division, and he was on the Moderna board of directors. And now he stepped down from the Moderna board of directors and allegedly sold off all of his stock, but he's the number one person in charge of determining who gets the money in the top 5 finalists for vaccines.
See, that's a huge problem with the government and private sector. It's in order to work for the government, the first thing you got to do is work for the private sector, and then you get a job for the government after you racked up some experience. Now you go to the government and you work a bunch of years there, rack up a bunch of debt favors in debt, and then you go back in the private sector and teach whoever you're working for how to beat the government system.
Oh, yeah.
It's just back and forth. You shouldn't be working for the SEC and then 6 months later be working for a hedge fund.
Oh, I think there should be a literal moratorium on your time that you can go into the private sector after you serve in the government. And I think the government should just match your salary. When you leave the government, you get a match salary for the next 3 years, and you cannot go and work with a company that does any business or anything in regulations or being benefited by the U.S. government, because I feel that way about that. I feel that way about media. I mean, the fucking Speaker of the House stepped down. Paul Ryan, when he stepped down, he's now on the board of directors of Fox News. What the fuck, man?
It's bananas. It's there are so few high-ranking generals in the military because they get to a certain level and they spend their entire the last third of their careers in the military lobbying for certain defense industries.
Oh, yeah.
And then instead of riding it out and getting the pension, they retire early, and then they go get these fucking jobs with the defense industry jobs for, huge money. And then, they start trading secrets back and forth or whatever the hell it is they do. I shouldn't say that because I don't know anything. But
that piece of shit company Theranos, right? Elizabeth Holmes. Mad Dog Mattis was on their board of directors. The fuck does Mad Dog Mattis know about blood testing? I mean, probably about as much as Elizabeth Holmes knew, to be honest. But the only reason that he's on the board of directors is to sell to the fucking army. It's pretty clear, I feel it's why would he be at at that company on the board of directors other than to get contracts with the government where he was a general and where he was a high-ranking official of the National Security Council.
The whole thing's fucked up. So let me ask you this question, because I don't know anything about it, but so recently, there's this whole big conspiracy about the video being taken down of all these doctors touting the, I'm going to fuck up how you say it, hydroxychloroquine and all these other things. And, it's on Twitter and it's 15 million views and then it's yanked down over here and then everyone's pumping it up and like, what the fuck is going on? These people, like, I did a little Googling and some of these people are they seem reputable to me. I mean, what the fuck do I know about who's a good doctor and who's not a good doctor? But, there are some people that have some, they've got big initials after their name from good universities and they're up there saying that this can suppress COVID. What's up? What's going on? Why aren't those people reputable? Why are certain media sources saying not to listen to them? And why are certain media sources saying they're being suppressed?
So I think that the problem right now is that we have a shit ton of different media sources, right? We have everywhere from podcasts to CNN, and you could say that you could get, even news from both, someone's podcast from a basement and CNN with the level that CNN, takes to their news at this point. But the thing is, so hydroxychloroquine is a antiviral, and early on in the progression of COVID, it was a new disease, right? And we tried to figure out, we threw every antiviral that we knew at it, everyone under development and whatnot. Hydroxychloroquine looked good, in some early cellular studies in the lab, right? It looked like it was going to do some shit. The problem actually ended up where when we did it in a clinical study, multiple different clinical studies in different countries, even the most recent one in the New England Journal of Medicine from a week or two ago was in Brazil, 45,000 patients in a combination therapy. And it just shows that there is no positive benefit from taking this drug. It's an unapproved drug in these indications, but that's really how the government regulates drugs, right? You can't just get a drug regulated because you say, oh, what the fuck? Does it do bad shit? Well, why don't we try it?
So is it effective at all?
No, it's not effective at all in patients. The one argument that people have tried to put forward in that crazy lady from Houston that was on the Capitol steps that went viral, who believes demon sex and demon sperm is the cause for all disease, and she owns the church next to her clinic and all sorts of crazy ass shit. She's a doctor.
Oh, so she's tax exempt too.
Dude, she's tax exempt. I'm sure all of the clinic money goes right through that church. She's the pastor at a church that's next to her clinic, and she treats people with tantric demon sex, and she believes that, lizards run the U.S. government. She has
hot?
a website. No, she's not. She's from me. But
that would have been a nice storyline.
But dude, yeah. But so that crazy motherfucker, she gets up on there, and why, you asked earlier, why are people saying this? And so just because people went to even a good university. There's this crazy ass dude that graduated my department at M.I.T. Named Dr. Shiva. He's on Twitter with 500,000 followers talking about how the deep state is suppressing hydroxychloroquine. He's a fucking idiot. But the thing is, controversy sells. We live in a world where if that doctor, that same crazy ass doctor or Dr. Shiva or any of these motherfuckers, if they went out and said, hey guys, wear a mask, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, and all of this, they would never get any media attention. But it's the same reason that Kim Kardashian gets fucked in the ass and then has a reality TV show, because it's about fucking attention. It's not about being right.
Yeah, I hear you, man. The big headline I saw today, as I was on my way home, is, I don't know if you saw this, Fauci's now urging Americans to wear goggles.
A lot of times the reporters will ask, and I've been misquoted like this in articles all the time, the reporters will ask questions like, would wearing goggles help, attune the transmission rate? And the doctor will probably say, yeah, fucking probably. It's a mucous membrane where viruses can enter. I mean, the most recent data that we have says that the biggest risk that you can do is not wear a mask in an enclosed area. Social distancing may not even really play into it, but it's really about being around a large amount of people in an enclosed area, because there's a study last month that showed that it's about the viral load that you're exposed to. So something like 90% of asymptomatic people think that they caught the virus in an open environment. So people who are asymptomatic think they caught it like outside, not wearing a mask. But when people get it inside, and this is why you see like young doctors and nurses dying, is because they're like under this huge viral load. Like if you think about it, like every infected person in an area is going to contribute a certain amount of viruses to the air. Like, and then you see these fucking like young people, doctors, nurses, like fucking dying, man. It's
like a video game health meter. It's like you get a bunch of shit exposed or like a bunch of little pellets hitting you and your health meter starts to go down. But one at a time is not going to maybe take out an otherwise healthy person.
Exactly. It's probably not going to take out an otherwise healthy person. I think the other big risk, though, and one of the things that's led me to tell a lot of my friends and relatives and everyone, even that are like young and healthy and fit and everything, is that one, we don't know what the long-term duration of these viruses are, right? It's not the flu. Like as much as people want to say like, oh, it's a bad flu, or people originally thought it was a type of the flu, what it does is it causes lung distress. But what it is a cardiovascular disease, from what we can say. So it is affecting your cardiovascular system, which can impact your respiratory system, which can impact your ability to breathe, but it is inflaming basically your what they call endothelial cells, which are like lining cells. They line your veins, they line your lungs, they're lining everything in your body. And so what ends up happening is that, people get these flu-like symptoms. But viruses can really fuck you up in the long term. Like they can fuck up your life for the rest of your life. And people, with the initial thought of that it was the flu, they thought, as soon as I'm good, as soon as I'm fine, as soon as I'm recovered and I'm not like wheezing anymore, even if I got intubated in the doctor's office, I'll be okay. We don't know that. Polio fucking paralyzed people. HIV killed people years after they transmitted it.
I want to come back to that because I have a question about that, but I wanted to ask you this other question first because my second favorite scientist is a guy named Coco Benitez. And he says that one of the big problems with coronavirus is that it lives primarily in the adipose fat tissue. Is there any accuracy to that? And if so, like, is that an argument for the government making, as usual, some drastically incorrect decisions in terms of what businesses they've allowed to be open during this time? So,
yes and no. So I think that the government's decisions have been based around highest rates of transmission. So I you run a gym, I assume it has something to do with your want for people to not have as much adipose tissue by coming in and fighting. Yeah. And a lot of people put on fucking the coronavirus 15. So there's some things that say that the virus may take up in certain cell types in your body. Some of it looks like adipose tissue. Again, like, I can't understate this enough. We are shooting like blind. Like, viruses can be completely, like, we could get over them. They can be completely harmless to normal people, or they could completely fuck you up in the long run. We really don't have, like, another Fauci article. Fauci was in Wired today or yesterday talking about, one of the long-term risks. What are the long-term risks of coronavirus? The thing is, we don't know. Like, we're not at a place in medical science where we can look at a virus or look at a response and say, this is going to fuck people up in the long run. Like, all we know is this is happening today. In a year, people who recovered from coronavirus could all of a sudden start, having fucking lung cancer for all we know. Like, we don't know.
So, like, there's a guy that, I've seen him on that goddamn cesspool Facebook, and he seems to be a pretty bright guy. He's a friend in common with another friend I have. And he's always on there talking about, like, the long-term lung scarring and this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, how do you know about the long-term effects of this thing? It's been here for 6 months. Like, how do we know what the long-term effects are? Is that just theory? And if so, like, why can't we theorize on other medical long-term outcomes?
So, with something like lung scarring, it's like, you look at the lungs right now, and if there's early signs of scarring, you know that the lung is very bad at regenerating itself from scar tissue because we've done, because of lung cancer, we've done millions of surgeries to remove lung tumors.
What about the liver?
So the liver is the most regenerative organ in your body, man. It replaces itself, super fast. That'll save a lot of us. But.
I'll sleep well tonight.
But I mean, like, so we know that if like lung scarring is happening, that will be. We don't know if that'll be a complication long term, but we know that scars in the lung can affect oxygen rates in your body for the rest of your life. And that will only get worse with your life because scar tissue prohibits reconstructive growth. So scar tissue only gets worse over time. It's like if you have a heart attack in your early 50s and it causes a lot of scar tissue, you probably just took 15 years off your life because you now have that fucking scar tissue.
Is there any amount of like cardiovascular exercise or aerobic exercise that can reverse the effects, or maybe not even reverse the effects, just kind of like increase your lung capacity or do anything that can offset the damage that was already done by the virus?
I mean, we don't for most of the part with lung scarring, you can increase your lung capacity over time. Like your lungs will adapt to whatever the fuck it is that you want to do. Now, maybe you're never going to be an ultra marathon runner, but if you get scar and tissue in your lungs through training over time, you can probably get yourself back to whatever like mediocre level of in shape you probably were, if you were even at that level.
And to be clear, we're basically just spitballing and guessing on that stuff based on.
Well, I mean, we know that if people get like scars in their lung, they can get back to a level of fitness. If Michael Phelps, in the middle of his like height of his career of crushing in the Olympics with his gigantic superhuman fishman lungs, if he had gotten lung scarring, it's unlikely he would get back to his level because he was at a peak performance level. I personally am not at a peak performance level. Most of America's not at a peak performance level. So if you went back and retrained, it would be harder to get back in shape, but you could probably get yourself back to the point where your lungs are able to take in the sort of oxygen that you need to, half-ass your way through a jiu-jitsu fight.
Take a look across the table. This is what peak performance looks like, my man.
Dude,
right here.
This is it right here. Like I'm hitting 30 in a couple months and coming in hot.
Wow.
Yeah, you must be.
Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't a professional fighter in my 20s. I was professionally trying to figure out this fucked up disease.
Yeah. Well, so when you talk about, training and doing all those other things, all that stuff is good after the fact. But I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was talking about how a lot of the problems with the coronavirus were due to like poor health habits of people, specifically in America, who, a lot of people are fat, a lot of people are out of shape. We have underlying health conditions. The big problem in Italy, I was reading in the journal, was that, people start smoking at fucking 9 years old and, they got high cholesterol. Everything's, baked with a pound of butter. Like how much of that, like, is there an example of like a really healthy population on earth that has less of has been affected less by corona, or is it just kind of universally similar? And
so that's actually kind of impossible to tell right now, right? Because what we're looking at when we talk about those diseases is just correlations, right? We're saying, okay, the death rate of people that have leukemia who get this disease is way worse. The people with, we know people with compromised immune systems are going to be worse at fighting off viruses in general. But people with high blood pressure, people with diabetes. But the other, in America, we've seen some other kind of fucked up things that, I don't know, maybe it highlights how awful our fucking healthcare system is, which is Black Americans are 1.8 times as likely to die of coronavirus than white Americans.
So is that a result of the healthcare system, or is that a result of some sort of a genetic thing where Black Americans are more predisposed to diabetes, which is a big underlying factor for this? I know some of my Filipino and Native American friends, they're genetically predisposed to like pancreatitis, right? And that's got nothing to do with the healthcare system. So is it a combination of those things?
So I would say that the genetic predisposition to like what you're talking about, diabetes and whatnot, where there might be a genetic predisposition to dying from the virus is probably more likely to lack of infrastructure to actual palliative care. And I say that because, these studies that show Black Americans are 1.8 times as likely as white Americans to die of the coronavirus across the board. Those are studies that are controlled for risk factors, known diseases and such. Now, could there be an underlying genetic thing that we don't fucking know about that's completely out there? In the world of possibility, yes.
So when you say controlled, I've never run a scientific experiment. So is an experiment controlled like let's say a population is generally more likely to be overweight than another population. Like, how do you control for that in an experiment? Like, what's that process?
So you can rank people by like, their weight or their BMI or what they're classically considered. Now, you're a health and fitness professional. BMI is bullshit, especially.
Right, BMI. I'm obese.
We're big
I'm
dudes.
obese.
I'm like probably obese at this
Fuck
point.
that.
Yeah. So fuck it. I was obese when I was like in high school wrestling, like down to my weight, and I was still
jacked.
overweight.
I was jacked.
Oh yeah, no, I was huge, but
you should have seen me in a singlet. It was tremendous.
God,
There's something to behold.
Real homoerotic. Yeah. Dude, so when you control for a study, basically it means that like all the confounding variables you've controlled for. So if I'm comparing, a black guy to, a black population to a white population, I am controlling individual populations of, okay, so here are, maybe I say I'm only going to look at healthy individuals. So no pre-existing conditions, no overweight, no any of that. And then I'm only comparing that to white people of the same type.
I see.
So you take out, what's called confounding variables,
Gotcha.
shit that throws in.
I took stats. I know what confounding variables are. I just didn't know how you controlled for them.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this other question. So you're obviously an expert in science and biology, but I'm sure that your level of experience and expertise goes well beyond that. When you say it's a symptom of our healthcare system, we live in Massachusetts and we live in a time of Obamacare, which is still largely in effect. What are the shortfalls of our healthcare system that could possibly be causing lower socioeconomic groups to fall victim to COVID?
So in the U.S. and in Massachusetts as well, even though we do have not only Obamacare, we also have Mass Health, which is Mitt Romney's project. We have socialized healthcare in the state of Massachusetts.
Oh, I know, brother. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Dude, so and we're definitely going to disagree. So like what in terms of healthcare access, like Obamacare is far from perfect, and it's not my favorite healthcare bill. I think it got 70 million people off of being uninsured, and that is a win, but it is not the win. It's basically like, hey man, like, I'm going to take this back to jiu-jitsu because that's like the original way that we know each other. So, I mean, it's like when you get your ass kicked in a match, but you didn't score points versus you get your ass kicked in the match. And you're like, yeah, but man, did you see me take him down in the third minute? Like I got a sick double on him. Yeah, he armbarred me, but like, fuck it.
I know a couple guys like that.
Yeah, Jackson. So, it's kind of like that where the bar was so low that I feel like Obamacare being good for the country is inherently true, though it missed so many aspects. One of the biggest things that Obamacare did that fucked us up, and it was part of the negotiation process, it wasn't in the original Obamacare, was that the U.S. government is the biggest buyer of pharmaceuticals in the world. The U.S. government buys, because of Medicare and Medicaid, the U.S. government buys more drugs than any other entity in the entire world. But because of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, it is forbidden from negotiating drug prices. So that is pretty fucked up. Like, Trump recently signed an executive order about drug pricing like last week, and it's made some ripples through the biotech community. I am not for, these weird executive orders. I think we need sweeping legislation to fix the healthcare system. But the thing that always comes up is like, we can't do it in America because America's different. Like, every single other rich country in this world has a single payer, has a form of socialized medicine. Because at the end of the day, we have to think about, like, what is the point of being this fucking rich if we can't take care of general people? Like, I've been poor. I've been down on my shit. I've been in graduate school where I barely could afford living in Boston. And I've been completely without, hope of getting health coverage for something. I've been to an ER and showed up with a $3,000 bill. We have no price transparency in this country. But when hospital systems have been overtaxed in this country, when hospital, with what's going on with COVID, and especially urban areas where a lot of Black Americans have been put over generations of socioeconomic and racist policies, the fact is that they have a lower access to healthcare because they cannot afford to pay it, or because a health system is incentivized to discharge patients that can't reliably pay them.
But isn't that the whole reason for like mass health and Obamacare, so that those people are getting healthcare? Because I mean, I know that in 2010, I had insurance through a company here in Mass, and I had it for myself and a spouse, and it was a total of $501 a month. I had my ACL replaced. My bill was like $150. I'm with that company still through Obama's presidency and now into Trump's, and I had my other ACL replaced. Same company, same insurance, it cost me at one point $800 a month. It's down now to about, I think it's $656, and I got like an $1,100 bill for my left ACL to be done. So like, I hear you on all those other things, but isn't that the whole reason that we have mass health and Obamacare, to take care of those people who are in the most unfortunate socioeconomic brackets?
So I don't know the Massachusetts black versus white disparity of coronavirus responses. Like I don't have that. I don't know the statistic. Jamie, pull that up. Yeah. But like what I think is a bigger issue is that there's a difference between being insured and being covered, right? And so I could say that, we can talk about your ACL in a second, but when someone has a insurance company, that might cover them for certain procedures, but the fact that the health insurance system is not unified in a single functioning system means that we have to have multiple pieces of free market economics at every single system.
But like, our health insurance system is the least free market system that we have, possibly. Now, again, I'm not an economist, but it's like, I mean, you can't bid across state lines. I mean, nobody knows what the hell you're paying for. There's no transparency. I mean,
right.
If me, who's just a knuckle dragging goon, I mean, I would think that the healthcare system is the least free market that we have. We've basically got, the government is forcing people to pay artificially inflated prices who use a service less, so that other people can use a service more at artificially low prices. Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
I said I'm not a fan of the ACA, and its implications. And I have, I wouldn't call this a conspiracy theory. I think it's pretty clear that this was going to happen, that this is what happened. But the ACA, in its negotiations by people who didn't want it to be successful, was set up to fail. Part of it is the fact that the U.S. government can't negotiate drug prices, and part of it is all the different sorts of fees and penalties that feed into it. But right now, you have to basically tell me that whether or not you think that a system that has, 17 companies between me and my doctor, between a principal care provider, between a payment system and health insurer, the hospital network, and then the hospital itself and all of their administrators, every single one of those people needs to make money, and they're making a fuck ton of money. Not just the doctor. The doctors are making decent money, but the administrators and the people at Blue Cross Blue Shield are making a fuck ton of money.
But what you're saying is a symptom of problems in almost every institution in the country. The bloated administration.
Yep.
Everywhere. To me, the biggest problem with our education and our protection, the police, is that we have so much bloated administration that we can't properly afford to pay the frontline workers, the customer-facing employees who are like the people in the classroom and the people on the streets. We can't afford to pay those people enough. And what happens is, think about how many cops you know. I know a shitload of people in law enforcement.
Yeah.
I know one kid who grew up our whole lives wanting to be a cop. All the other people in law enforcement that I know, they just wound up there. I know a dude that was in theology school at Yale. He's got a PhD in theology, and now he's kicking indoors and fighting a drug war that he'll tell you is a waste of time. There are some people that grow up and they want to be teachers, and but there are also, those are professions where people kind of fall back into because they know that there are always openings and they can do that. And the starting salaries aren't enough to make those jobs competitive. You need to start these motherfuckers at $100K a year, and you got to take that fat button pushing lady who does nothing but scowl at people, and she exists, or he, or they, or Zier, whatever.
Zoom.
They exist in every level of every institution. Like bureaucracy, my friend posted something on Facebook and it was the greatest definition of bureaucracy is work that adds no value.
Yeah.
And that's what they do. And so if you start to cut those people out, unions won't allow it. Now what you do is you can start these cops at $100,000 a year. And at $100,000 a year, guess what happens? The applicant pool gets a lot deeper. You can now choose types of people that you want to work there. They're going to be more qualified. They're going to be more educated. They're going to be better applicants. And hopefully you can cut down on some of the shit that we have. Like unions, in my experience, and like from people that I know, especially in education and in like protection, law enforcement specifically, all unions do is keep the worst people at their jobs employed the longest.
So unions have a storied history over our history as a nation, right?
But we don't have 12-year-olds working in factories anymore.
We don't, but I can guarantee you that if we had 12-year-olds working in factories today, and Bernie Sanders came out and said we got to get these fucking 12-year-olds out of these factories, Ted Cruz would come out with a tweet that said, "Who's going to pay the extra money for that factory? These 12-year-olds got to contribute." Like, I know that's an exaggeration, and I know that's like. The fact is that we're sitting with hindsight and we can look back at the past.
You sounded more like Bernie than Ted there.
Well, good. Like Bernie's a better person.
Just the impersonation.
Like the billionaires. But like, you know, so like in my opinion, like what you have to think about is, okay, so the healthcare system is filled with bullshit administration. Now, why is that? It's because you have inefficient, monopolistic systems. You said, I think we don't have a free market system. And you're right, which is why I think that the government should take over the healthcare system with actual true funding. Because at the end, we're seeing with coronavirus, public health is in everyone's best interest. It is not what we do not want, you know, individual hospitals, depending who gets coronavirus treatment and who doesn't, because we want no one to have coronavirus because that's how we get the fuck out of this mess.
But that's what they're doing in Pennsylvania today. Did you see that? So in the New York Times, they just published an article today and it said in Pennsylvania, what they're doing is they've got a drug that's helping to treat coronavirus and they're doing a weighted lottery. And because everyone is so goddamn woke now, the weighted lottery is heavily favoring lower income people. It should just be who needs the drug the most. There shouldn't be a weighted lottery. Now, the disclaimer is I'm an asshole because all I did was read the headline and then the first 3 sentences, which is what I always am yelling at people about doing. But that is what I read, and there probably are some different nuances to the story that I don't quite understand. And frankly, I probably wouldn't understand if I read the whole article anyway.
I didn't read it. It could be that in the weighting system, in terms of need, they've classified need as in terms of how high density of a living community, of a living population, or a living community do you live in, and low income people who live in subsidized or you know projects essentially do need it more because they have a non-control over who they're around all the time. They have a low income group and they have a high density of those sorts of people, and they also have a lower access to healthcare. So if you're going to weight it in terms of a public health need of who needs this the most, I would argue that you should weight it to people who are in public housing, and it's a side effect that people that live in public housing are lower income. It's not necessarily it. I don't know. I didn't read this fucking article. I'm playing, devil's advocate.
No, I hear you. And it's like all this coronavirus, and frankly, all news, it comes out so fast now, and it's like there's so much of it. Like you don't even really have time to read it. Like I'm always yelling at people like read the fucking article and then Google the author and figure out what their angle is. But in reality, there's so much of it that everyone gets caught in the headline. Everyone gets caught just reading the first couple of lines, and then we don't critically think about where did this come from, what's the motive, because let's be honest, I think the days of objective journalism are gone, and I think that everything is about clicks and everything is about everything, and we have to consider that when we consume news sources, which is why I was having a conversation today with one of my employees who's from another country, and he's here on a student visa, and I was saying, look, man, like what I do is I got a couple of left-wing news sources and a couple of right-wing news sources and an international news source. And if there's a topic that interests me enough that I care about, I try and go through all those news sources and see what everyone is saying and then put the pieces together based on my own experiences and my own beats. Because you know, Fox is going to be full of shit, MSNBC is going to be full of shit, and BBC is going to be full of shit, but they're all going to be full of their own shit.
Right. And so, like, dude, have you ever read the book Manufacturing Consent? It's by Noam Chomsky.
Noam Chomsky, yeah.
Yeah. So Manufacturing Consent is this book that basically says that it's not about what the media says, it's about how they frame the conversation, right? And so when the left-wing or right-wing media, whatever you think, and this was a book that was written years back, right? Like, it's an old book, and most of the book covers the U.S. through the 60s, through the Vietnam War, through the Reagan years, and a little bit into Clinton. What it does is it says that it's not about what the media is even arguing for. It's about how the media frames the conversation and the words they use, right? So if they talk about the legitimacy of an election in Nicaragua, where they talk about the freedom of a democratic election in Guatemala, that inherently is changing your conversation, because now you're saying, okay, like, is Nicaragua's election legitimate? Like, and who is saying? Because it doesn't matter if they say, let's talk about the legitimacy. It is legitimate. Let's talk about the legitimacy. It's not legitimate. Now you can say, oh, one's right wing and one's left wing. But the fact that they've raised the question raises the question for us more so than we should be saying, well, what are the metrics of overarching legitimacy, and how do we apply that to Nicaragua and Guatemala?
So Ron Paul actually had something interesting to say about that. And he said, and I mean, I don't have a fact-checking team here. It's me and my cat. But he was basically talking about how over the last few months, the media has been changing slowly the terminology they're using in the headlines from coronavirus deaths to coronavirus cases, because most people only fixate on the number that's in the headline. And so by doing so, the number grows when you change it from deaths to cases. And so you're changing a lot of perceptions in people's minds, and they kind of don't know that you're actually changing the context of it.
So Ron Paul's a fucking idiot. And like, he's probably the stupidest medical doctor since Ben Carson to be a part of our political establishment.
Are you biased?
I mean, dude, I fall like on the left, but I hate the neoliberals. I'm more progressive, but like, Clinton, Biden, all of them, like, eat a dick. But like, the fact of the matter to me is that Ron Paul, through the whole coronavirus thing, has been nothing but a fucking dumb idiot trying to stay relevant. Now, I understand why they're changing it to cases. And it's because in the coronavirus, if you look at all the curves, if you look at what happened in every single country in terms of cases versus death, there's a 2.5 week lag on every curve in terms of increasing cases and increasing deaths. Now, fucking media whores like Elon Musk, right, and his brother Kimball were tweeting out when the new cases.
He's got a brother named Kimball?
He's got a brother named Kimball Musk who runs a farming startup. I don't know. They're all.
Sounds like when I was in high school and I didn't have enough money for cologne, I'd go through the CVS aisle and get a spritz of something. Yeah. Before I took my babe to Olive Garden.
Kimball Musk. Yeah, that's kind of what he looks like. He's like the cologne that Elon wears. So like the thing is, like, what I saw these guys doing while cases were increasing in the United States was they were purposefully talking about, well, why aren't the deaths increasing? Why aren't the deaths increasing? When you could easily look at any graph of any other country or even the United States when we were dealing with this bullshit and say, here's where the cases started, and here's where the deaths started, and there's about a 2.5 week lag before this catches up. And so when you talk about that change, that becomes a problem when you're talking about a new peak, because what you can't do is you can't say, our deaths were dying off from the first wave and the cases were increasing. So there's not a thing to talk about the cases. There's not a point to talk about that has to do with the cases. What you have to do is say, cases are spiking again. And now what we're seeing, since Ron Paul's dumbass said that shit, we're seeing the deaths start to spike again, as we would in the model of 2.5 weeks. So I don't believe that, to go back to your point about clickbait journalism, like that's where we are, right? Right now, today, compared to 20 years ago, we have less than half the number of journalists in this country. Journalism is not a productive form of making money anymore. We cannot make productive amounts of capital through journalism, and
but journalism, it's taken on a different tone now. Like, I mean, every dickhead with a Twitter account has a platform to get their message across now, and that's what journalism is now. That's why it's a dying profession. It's because it's the supply has outrun the demand.
Well, I would actually change that argument to say that I would change that argument to say a little bit of the world has decided, or the country, let's just say the country has decided that we're not willing to pay for content anymore. Like the American consumer is very much not willing to pay to get their news. I want to get on fucking Facebook and see what people say. I want to get on Twitter and see what people say. I want to get on Reddit and see what people say.
Well, because when you go on Facebook, Twitter, or Reddit, you can get people to say things that you already agree with. Whereas if there's an objective news source, now you're paying for someone to tell you something you don't necessarily agree with. And it's like, do I want to wake up every morning, pay a fee, and have someone tell me that what I already think is wrong? No, nobody wants to do that. No. Everybody wants to be right.
No. That's right. But I think even long before we had the social media echo chambers, we entered when Steve Jobs rolled out the iPad, before print journalism was fully at the level of shittiness that it is today. When we rolled out the iPad, Steve Jobs talked about working with these media outlets who were unable to capitalize on a changing market. And they were trying to go, okay, we'll go free and we'll go all ads. But the thing is, they had been struggling for decades and only brought ads into the New York Times, the Washington Post, to these print media, to Wall Street Journal, to mention a conservative outlet. Like, they only brought ads in to augment, but what they did was they prolonged a problem. They prolonged the fact that Americans don't want to pay for news. What do we do about that? What do we do about the fact that Americans want news? They want to know what's going on, but they don't want to pay for it.
See, I think there's a difference here. I don't really think Americans want to know what's going on. I think Americans want their biases confirmed, and there's a difference.
No, I agree. Like,
and I think that's what divides us. I mean, like, Facebook at one point had like some fucked up slogan about connecting people and all this other shit. Like, the whole new algorithm is gone away from that, and what it's about is it's about groups. Like, all the business groups that I'm in, they're all about like create a group. People constantly are unfollowing people who disagree with their ideas.
Right.
And so you're right. It creates an echo chamber. And so this goddamn Facebook that was supposed to connect everybody, really what it does is it divides people and it segregates people further into tribes. And now they're just large tribes, and they're dumbass fucking tribes, and they're people fighting online. And, as I said earlier, this is not my line, but my boy said, like, dude, fighting with someone on Facebook is like arguing with your girl on text. And it's just like, no matter how hard you press those buttons, like, she's not going to believe you, or she's not going to understand you any better. You're just slamming some buttons. You might as well slam your face into the screen.
No, exactly. I mean, the other analogy that I've heard is that it's just like, playing chess against a pigeon. It doesn't matter what great strategy you have, what awesome moves you make. That pigeon is going to walk over, knock your pieces over, shit all over the board, and strut around like it won something. And that's exactly what happens on Facebook. But what Facebook did is it did connect us. What it taught me at least, I'm realizing in my Facebook, is that the people who I've left behind in earlier parts of my life, like, people from other areas where I used to live, or I grew up in a rural area, places where I left. A lot of those people were a big part of the reason that I fucking left.
So that's the thing. So I'm 15 years older than you. My undergraduate degree was in communication, another bunch of bullshit, and is like poor man psychology.
Like the other thing, so the UK had this bill that came out a while back, which was called like right to be forgotten, right? And it was the right to like remove yourself from, different sorts of Google searches and everything, to get yourself out of caches. The bigger part, I feel like, that we should be asking ourselves is like the right to forget, people, because I know that on my Facebook, like, as a progressive person who also grew up in Central Illinois and grew up with the exact same mindset as the people who I now really disagree with I became progressive over a time, my first election I ever voted in was McCain-Obama, and I voted for John McCain. It's like a week after my 18th birthday, and I voted for John McCain, and I was a very hardcore Republican for a long time in my life.
So we switched. So I was a hardcore Democrat when I was a kid. And I'll tell you, man, the thing that switched me was basic training, going in the Army. And my whole everything shifted. But I want to just go back to one thing you said about like Facebook and like the right to forget. Like in interpersonal communication, like what they'll tell you is like the timeline of your life, there are reasons that people fall out of your life and there are reasons that people stay in your life. In technology as a blessing and a burden, sometimes it keeps people in your life too long, and that could be something you don't want to have to deal with.
You're not allowed to,
like fucking crazy people stalking you online.
Oh, fuck, man. Recent success in my life has led to a weird DMs in my Facebook account.
I wish I could log into MySpace right now.
Oh,
I would show you some shit.
I wish I could see my fucking top 8 friends that I used to. That's what I think we're actually missing. I think Facebook needs a ranking system, not 8, like 10. Like Facebook needs Zuck the bitch, like he needs to get on this. I want to rank my friends. I want to rank my top 10 friends every day. If I'm going to use Facebook, I want to know. I want to let everyone know where they stand.
Dude, I didn't even have 8 friends
on Facebook.
No,
on
I was
MySpace.
I was like, my number 3 friend was Denzel Washington. I was like, Denzel, can we be
make
friends?
him your number 3. Make him your number 3. Just be like, no, dude, like me and Denzel are really fucking close.
Yeah.
Like I've been talking to him about Remember the Titans. And
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy time.
So, like when I look at it, like when I look at the one thing about forgetting is, it's one thing to be reminded, right, of the people you left behind. Like they come out of nowhere, they all of a sudden join Facebook in 2012, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like I used to have this really racist friend when I was in 8th grade, and now I like, now they're back in my life, and they build monster trucks, and they're commenting on my statuses about Black Lives Matter and telling me to like go fuck myself, I'm a commie. But like, the other thing that I'm getting now, like as I enter my 30s, and I've changed a lot over my 20s, is I'm realizing that the bigger part is not the right to forget, but it doesn't allow people to fade away in my life. Like I can't let friends that I'm growing distant from fade away because they're still right there in the middle of my fucking feed. And it is causing probably issues where I'm like, well, we had different beliefs when we started being friends 8 years ago. Like we had some different thoughts. And as time has moved, the world has moved, and either you or me or both of us have moved apart in our beliefs. And I don't hate you, but we're probably not going to have a whole lot to talk about. But now, because of the connections, I don't know how to let you slowly fade out of my life because you're going to be in the middle of it. And now, after
unfollow, you got to unfollow them. Just unfollow these people and like, they'll slowly fade. For me, like I can't interact on Facebook because like, so one of the reasons I started unfollowing people on Facebook was because there are a lot of people that I really like in real life. And then their social media personas, I was like, you're such an asshole on social media that if I continue to watch this, I'm going to wind up hating you in real life. And I didn't want to do that. I mean, people like that you're talking about, I would say unfollow those motherfuckers and let them slip off into the sunset. Like let them die a slow death on Facebook and don't engage them. The more you engage them, the more they're going to come around. It's like a psycho girlfriend. If you ignore her for 3 months, she's going to eventually get tired of slamming her face into your car window. But if what you do is keep unrolling the window to try and kiss her, she's never going to fucking leave.
So, dude, I'm looking at your books on the shelf, and I'm seeing that you like have a bunch of economics books, but they're written by a lot of economics people that veer on one side of the political spectrum, right? And so, in economics, it has a huge issue with like political bias. Do you ever like think about the fact that if you only read books that are from far right or not far right, but just right leaning economists, that you'll end up with a right leaning economics view?
I would say if you were talking to someone much smarter than me, the answer could probably be yes. But in reality, I read those books and I only get 1 or 2 messages out of those things. And the message that I get about economics is it's basically just about allocation of scarce resources and the alternative uses of those scarce resources. I can't even comprehend the next level of it to see the political bias side of it. So the answer to your question is probably, if you're talking to someone smarter than me, yeah, that might be a case, but not for me. So the Great Courses is a cool like lecture thing, you know, like Chris Rivera turned me on to this economics course a couple of years ago, and I listen to it all the time, and I do some other stuff on there. And the reality is that like my brain is pulled in so many different directions, and like I have so many interests in so many different things that I can't actually delve deep enough into the economics portion of things to get the next level understanding. And so I just want to understand, like, the overarching theme for me is that there's always an unintended consequence to the choice that you make. And really, that bookshelf, and if you open one of those cabinets over there, there's a bunch of other books. Really, those things interest me. But the entire reason I read any of those books is because I want to pull from them some principle that I can apply to jiu-jitsu to make my jiu-jitsu better and to make my jiu-jitsu teaching better. That's all I care about.
So okay, I'm not interviewing you, but
you can.
You know, jiu-jitsu, right? Jiu-jitsu is so that's how we know each other, right? Like jiu-jitsu is the great melting pot of society.
Totally.
Right? It brings it. You can think whatever you want. Like, you know, our gym has cop haters and literal cops who are, you know, training together, able to have, you know, go to each other's parties and have talks and understand like where there is common ground. I think jiu-jitsu and, you know, actually fighting each other is a way to, you know, you don't even have to talk to each other. You're just having a sort of like language.
It's because combat is a survival mechanism.
Right.
It's primal, like fucking.
Right.
Violence and combat are self-preservation techniques. And now you go ahead. I'm done.
Well, so I found out that like COVID made a huge point of this to me, where I thought that I just wasn't doing other workouts because I had jiu-jitsu. But what I found out during the quarantine and the gyms being shut down and all that shit was like I missed, like not only did I miss jiu-jitsu and miss my friends and miss the community that I had at, you know, at our gym, at your gym, whatever, like what I found out was I just don't give a shit about working out anymore if it's not going to, like, it's one thing to run on my off day of jiu-jitsu and know, like, if I run this extra mile, I'm going to be able to, like, smash Justin or Bug or, you know, any of these motherfuckers, like, who come at me. But it's another, like, I don't have any motivation.
You just threw down the gauntlet.
Oh yeah, well, dude, Justin's been training during quarantine. Like, I'm gonna need a couple weeks.
Yeah,
I'm gonna sound like an emphysemac. Like I'm gonna look like a bitch.
Well, what you're saying is, like, what I think the problem is with, well, not the problem, but the situation with a lot of things is we're so into immediate results and instant gratification that, like, you can go to a gym and you can lift weights and you can do cardio and all those things. And in the first 8 weeks, you'll probably get some gains because you'll put more weight on, but it's because of a neurological response. You're creating neural pathways and then your body's getting more used to those movements. But it's not until 8 weeks that you're actually going to get stronger and build muscle mass. Whereas in jiu-jitsu, you can learn a new technique, and in that week, you can see direct results, you know, from the effort that you've put in. It's a totally different thing. I mean, like, we're hooked on instant gratification, whether it's motherfucking likes, whether it's shares, whether it's swipes on a dating app, or whether it's tapping someone in jiu-jitsu. We are about instant gratification. We're a culture that no longer wants to put in any effort for anything.
So, like, jiu-jitsu actually, I don't even know if I've ever told you this before, like, jiu-jitsu, no joke, straight up changed my life in the middle of it. And it wasn't like I was, like, depressed or doing anything pretty fucked up. But when I moved from Central Illinois, like, I went to University of Illinois, which is still in fucking bumblefuck, Big Ten college town, and I moved out to Boston, and I went to M.I.T. The only people I knew in Boston,
bunch of nerds,
were fucking, like, okay, a number of people I really like, but yeah, man, it was a completely different landscape. Like, even when I was at U of I, like, I was studying engineering, but most of my friends, like, they were like communications majors, like you.
There are some tough nerds, though. Let's be honest.
Okay,
there
are some tough nerds. There's some tough nerds at our gym.
Yeah.
But I've met a number of those tough nerds, like, Grace and Mike and Lex. I've met those fuckers, like, through the gym, actually, more than I have, like, through jiu-jitsu, more than I have, like, meeting them at MIT. But the problem is that where the first 2 years I spent in Boston, I was like, man, like, I don't know, maybe Boston's just not my thing. Maybe I'm more of a Midwest person. I don't really vibe with these fucking people. But I came to the gym and, it wasn't like I even had friends at the gym for the longest time. Like, you're a white belt, you're just like fucking around, you're getting to know people, you're trying to like figure out jiu-jitsu before you like die. And like what I found out was jiu-jitsu like just level sets everyone. You don't know what anyone does. No one's like, oh, this is Steve. He runs, this is Steve. He's a co-founder of X. This is, Jess. She's an immuno-oncologist. Like that fucking shit that happens in every other aspect of my professional life was like, not even that. It was maybe, hi, like my name's Jared. I would like to do open guard. Like, not that Jared would ever do open guard, but like, the same fucking thing. Like,
the best analogy I have for that is like, I remember like at the end of my basic training and then advanced training in the Army, and you go in there and the first bunch of dudes you meet, they all got shaved heads and everyone's wearing the same shit. And then you go through all this training together and you form these bonds, a lot like jiu-jitsu, and like you're trading sweat and you're trading blood and like you're kind of like propping each other up. Some people are assholes and once in a while you got to check somebody. But then at the end of advanced training, after you do basic training and then you learn your job, there's a night where you get to go out and everyone puts on your clothes. You put your civilian clothes on. So these guys that you've been friends with the whole time, now you put your civilian clothes on and you look at them and you go, oh, you're that guy? And now you're trying to like categorize them based on what kind of clothes they're wearing. But it's like, dude, we were bros for months. We were fucking bros for months. And now it's like, oh, that's what you wear when you go out. That's the music you listen to. It's the same in jiu-jitsu. Like the rare occasion that we have a social encounter in jiu-jitsu, like with a big group of people, you're like, oh, these are the dudes that I train with. These are the dudes that I do all the stuff with. And then you go out and you're like, oh, you want to go to that club? That place sucks. Or, oh, that's your outfit. But at the end of the day, it's like, there are bonds that form between human beings, whether they're men and women, whatever it is, like that can't be forced. And too many jiu-jitsu gyms force this fake fucking osing, vibing, family, God bullshit that doesn't exist. That has to be organic. You know how you become bros with somebody? You cross-face the fuck out of them. You drip some sweat in their mouth. They bleed on your face. You shake hands after. And then on that weekend, you go and get a beer and a shot. And, you argue about what music to play on the jukebox. That's how you become bros. And that's what jiu-jitsu does. And that's what the military does. And there are just bonds that are formed that can't be formed in another way other than dripping sweat and blood in another buddy's face.
It's a crucible. Right?
It's a crucible.
It's just like the strongest.
Great play.
Arthur Miller. Like to me, it's just like we have something that we know about that other people don't. Like we have a thing, we have a language, we have a way to communicate, and there's just no replacing that. There's a trust that you build with people where. There is a trust where you're counting on someone to stop fucking
not break your shit off
or not break your arm if you tap out. Like, I mean, it's it's fucking wild.
So, talking about that, I remember back in my undergrad, like again, I was a communication major because I was just trying to get through school, and you've already denigrated my scholastic efforts enough, so we're not going to harp on this. But but I remember that we learned a lesson about how if you want to form a lasting bond with someone early in the relationship, you need to like take part together in an extreme situation that creates a lot of adrenaline or a lot of emotion. So they were like, look, if you find somebody that you like to date, take them skydiving because you're going to have formed a bond with them early on in the relationship that won't be broken. Like maybe you start dating someone and a grandparent dies. Like that's a bond, but that's something that like binds you together long term. Same thing for jujitsu in the military. Like, you're going through something that no one else knows about but you. You're sharing an experience with someone, and maybe we're talking about guys and guys, or guys and girls, or girls and girls, whatever, but there's an experience that no one else can share but you. And within that world, within the jujitsu world, you've got people that can share even more kind of clearly defined, more limited experiences. Like, okay, maybe you're the best competitor in the gym, and you can only relate to the other best competitor in the gym. So, there's all these experiences that bind people together, and they kind of create relationships that outside of jiu-jitsu might not have existed. I got a buddy, Dom Nuzdu, and honestly, like, he lives in Texas now. If he called me up and he was like, I need you in Texas tomorrow, I'd probably get on a plane instantly and be there. But if you ever saw the two of us or knew our like subsets of friends, we would have never been friends without jiu-jitsu. But because of jiu-jitsu and because of the bond that was formed, that will last forever. I haven't trained with him in 10 years, but if he calls me up and says, I need you in Texas, I'll probably get on a plane.
And as you know, I have a friend like that too, which would have never, ever been friends with. But, it is the bond you form. Like, so what's interesting is like when you try to do, like, you're a small business owner, I have a startup. When you try to start these ventures, you're trying to get other people bought into it, and there's this thought of like, how do I build community in a community I'm not a part of? Like, how do I build community in how do I get investors to trust me? And one of the things I've actually thought about a lot is just like, how do I like expand this network I have? Like, how do I forge these bonds with people like that? How do I induce crucibles in my life? Now, I don't have a fucking answer, but I think, like, if more people did martial arts, I'd love to do that. I mean, I ran into when I was at M.I.T. You were with me, I think. We were at a tournament, like the Boston Open, and I ran into one of my thesis committee members,
right,
who did not give a shit about me at the time. Like, we could not have. He was like, yeah, this is a guy who I'm on his thesis committee. He's a professor at M.I.T. He doesn't just give a shit. But after that moment, like, just the fact we didn't even roll together, just the fact that we were both at a jiu-jitsu tournament. Unknowingly to the other, we immediately became close. Like, we were like, oh, okay.
You perceive to have an experience or a level of knowledge between the two of you that you think a lot of other people don't have, and you're right, and that forms a bond. And that's just the way that it is.
Oh, and how do you? I don't know. It's. Jiu-jitsu was just like this thing that gave me so much community and purpose in Boston, and gave me probably 75% of my like close friends in Boston, that it was like I don't know. I think more people should do jiu-jitsu. I just like
people should just fight each other.
Yeah, fight. Just like get the shit out. Like, what? I feel like Twitter would be a lot less fucking grossly toxic if people would just go out and fucking fight each other.
So back in the day, there was a forum in 1998 called submissionfighter.com. And then it was MMA.com. Now it's mixedmartialarts.com. And dude, back in the day, you could be sitting on there. You could be talking to Tito Ortiz, Matt Hughes, everybody. Like, there was like 50 people on there that had a professional fight. And the rule was you couldn't say anything on there that you wouldn't say to a fighter's face, or you got banned. That's how the whole fucking internet should be. Now, I'm not a fan of government regulation, but one thing I think the government should regulate is every internet chat board, every forum, every piece of social media, motherfucker, you got to put your name on that. You have to put your name on that. Like, I don't want like, Ren McCormick 69 talking shit to me and like threatening me or whatever. Like, I want to know who you are. Like, people, when they have to own those comments and the things that they say and the things they do, I think they're less likely to be assholes. But I might be wrong.
No, but the problem is that the person being on the receiving end of the asshole could also be a piece of shit. And so what you don't guarantee when you make someone stand up behind their comment is that the other person will be willing to set a fair stage, right? So if another weak-blooded human is on the receiving end of being called, being like, hey, actually, fuck you, let's do you want to talk
But
about
wouldn't
this?
that prevent the first person from saying something that might incite that?
Maybe, but like, what determines inciting it? If I get on and someone says, Black Lives Matter is a communist group, and I come in and I go, actually, like, it's not a communist group, and here are some reasons I think that, and someone takes that as a personal offense, and they decide, rather than reaching out to me and saying, hey, bitch, like, let's fucking go, if they turn around and they go, I'm gonna wait outside his work and I'm gonna fucking kill him.
But I think that increases the civility. Like what you're saying is 100% accurate. And I think that what happens is, like, let's say we disagree on a topic, you and I, and like, that there are repercussions for what you say. You might phrase it differently. You might frame it differently. You might be like, hey, you know what, JC? Yeah, you think this about that, but here are my thoughts. Instead of being like, you know what, you fucking cocksucker? Fuck you, and I hope your mother dies. Because then I am coming to your work, and then I'm going to smash the shit out of you. But because that's a real possibility now, there are real world repercussions. The problem with what a lot of people do online is that there are no real world repercussions. When I was a little kid, now, I'm not 20, I'm not 25, and I'm certainly not 30. But if we ran our mouths, like, I mean, there was going to be someone around the corner, and, you'd have to deal with them. I'm not saying you had to fight everybody, but there'd be someone that you'd have to defend your viewpoint to face to face. And now there's a bunch of cyberspace in between a bunch of people, and you got huge balls.
I completely agree, but on the other, like, I agree that people love the animosity that they can have by, utilizing the internet. But the problem actually becomes when I think about it, that if you are completely, open with your viewpoints, there will always be someone on cyberspace that can, by a targeted attack, can fuck you up, right? So how do you control for that? How do you control for some crazy ass motherfucker showing up to your house, to your family's event, to your kids' thing? Like, how do you control for someone who is going to show up and hurt you in a way that you don't have to defend yourself, right? I'm all for, like, I will 100% defend myself or defend my views, like, to someone. If we're on, like, if you and I are on social media, I may comment on one of your things and say, like, there's been things you've even said before where I'm like, I think you're wrong, dude.
You control for it by the way that you talk to people, I think.
You control for it, but there are people in the world in cyberspace. When we talk about cyberspace, there are people in the world who believe that a insult is something as simple as Black Lives Matter. Look at the people who are offended by the word Black Lives Matter, or look at the people who are offended by the Confederate flag. I'm not saying the Confederate flag's not offensive,
but this is a balance of power. So that creates a balance of power. When there are people who are concerned about how their comments will be perceived because there are real-time penalties, there's a balance of power, and they think more deliberately about the things they say because there's real-time penalties. Now, sometimes I think that there are legitimate, like, arguments for stupidity online. You're always going to have some dickhead who, doesn't matter if his name's attached to it or not, is going to say something inflammatory. But I think that what you're going to do is you're going to cut out the middle 2/3 of people who are just starting trouble to start trouble online. And, you say something to me online and you say, oh, like, whatever, you insult my post, or, I mean, I don't make posts, I don't really give a shit. You insult something, like, there's going to be a repercussion because your name's attached to it. You'll always have the people who won't care, but I think at least you'll dwindle down the number of people who will say things just to inflame people, the trolls.
I mean, I agree with that. I don't know if you'll ever be able to prevent people from making fake accounts.
That's true. I mean, like, you got to verify your PayPal account, don't you?
I mean,
Elon.
Well, what? Vote by mail.
Dude, I just took a class, and it was about surveys, and I don't want to go down this path because we've been drinking a little bit, and I would want to brush up on it. But the least accurate survey for market research or any other type of survey is mail-in surveys.
Of course it is.
Of course it is.
Because people have the same amount, what you just said about animosity or anonymity. People have anonymity when it's mail-in, and what you get is that people will say things how they think about themselves, and especially they won't feel like they'll ever have to live up to it.
You got brothers or sisters?
I have one sister.
Okay, imagine you live at home. You're an assertive guy. I'll bet you that if you lived at home with your family and the ballots came to your mailbox and your sister was like, you know what, I'm going to vote opposite of Jake, I'll bet you that you could put her in a room, proverbially, and I'll bet you could convince her to check the box that you want her to check. It's too much influence. There's too much going on there.
So your whole idea is that the risk is that a household will have a split ballot, and that then the household will lobby to a specific person.
I wouldn't say
in an age of technology where, candidates are allowed to be in your fucking face 24/7 on your Facebook feed, on your fucking everything. We've been voting by mail for literally since we had the mail system.
So again,
You file our taxes by mail.
we file taxes in a certain way, and I don't want to get into some of the liberties that can be taken when you file your taxes by mail or online with TurboTax, because I'm going to plead the fifth on that. However, I do think that if you're in a larger household, there are opportunities to influence people the way you want, which is why you can't be within certain feet of a voting booth. There are all kinds of things. And again, I don't know enough about the statistical relevance of mailing surveys / ballots to people, but I just think it's probably not a great idea.
I just don't.
My gut.
I just don't believe that the risk factor of a split ballot household in America.
Why are you saying split ballot? What do you mean by that?
I mean, the fact that you live in a house where the political views within the house are split. Like, it is very uncommon in America where a house that has, and somehow the house has brothers and sisters and parents all over 18 years of age, which, is pretty uncommon in the first place. But not only does it have that, it also has a difference of political ideology, especially in today's world of hyperpolarization. There are very few families who could stomach living under the same roof and I couldn't live with my family even if they agreed with me.
I mean, anecdotally, I agree with you on the first part, but anecdotally, I'm not sure that that's true, that people wouldn't be able to live under the same roof with like very polarized political views. I'll bet you there are some boomers out there that are ashamed of their kids who are like doing some like super left-wing progressive shit, like regardless of whether you think it's right or wrong. I'll bet you there are some like basement dwelling kids playing video games who disagree totally with their parents' politics. But I guess I don't want to talk about something that I talk about some shit that I'm really uneducated about a lot, but I'm really uneducated about mail-in ballots. But I would guess that, like, I read an article the other day that talked about how it could take up to 12 months for the government to catch up to the fact that you've changed your address. So maybe a family of 5 moves out of a place and now a family of 1 lives there or whatever. And you get 5 ballots in the mail. Yep. And all of a sudden, brrr, next thing you know, you got 5 votes for Joe Jorgensen.
Right. It is on that family to register themselves at their new location. And if they do that, and if you re-register yourself, your new location will be prioritized. Like it will inactivate your previous ballots. Right now, our mail-in ballot system is actually pretty good. Actually, last year, 10% of America voted by mail, including all of our service members overseas and most American politicians, including, the current president and his whole family. They all voted in Florida. And so the idea that mail-in ballots will somehow compromise the election. Meanwhile, we
You're talking about a small number. I mean, like, I think that that's probably, and I shouldn't come off as I'm arguing against mail-in ballots because I don't know enough about it to like take a side or another, one side or the other. But I will tell you that my gut instinct, like knowing what I know from, school and market research and things, that it's unreliable. My gut instinct is that it's probably not good. And I think that overseas soldiers and current politicians voting via mail is such a small percentage that it's not statistically significant.
10% of Americans.
10.
Only 25% of Americans voted in the last election.
That's a fucking problem right there, brother.
Oh, huge fucking problem. 25% of eligible Americans. Okay, so for instance, I'm going to pull some numbers out of my ass right now, but I'm pretty sure that it was 13 million to 10 million Hillary versus Trump. Like Hillary had 13 million, Trump had 10 million votes last year. That's 23 million people decided to vote. 3 million more for Hillary. Electoral college, which we don't have to talk about, swung in a huge majority for Trump. And 26 million of a 300 million
That's crazy.
population. I think it is that, like, you saw Bernie, like, when he ran, it looked like he was going to blow Joe Biden out of the water. Like, he had new policies. He said, fuck the establishment. I'm going to be different. I'm going to be completely different.
Everybody says that. And then by the time they get elected, they're so beholden to everybody that even if they really meant what they said on their way to the office, by the time they get there, they can't get anything passed because they're so beholden to everyone.
But that was Bernie because he stuck to it. He never took PAC money. He took only individual donors. He stuck.
His wife stole a bunch of money from a university. I mean, he's a money grubbing fuck too.
Dude, he's been in Congress for 30 years and he's got a net worth of $4 million.
But he's never had another job.
No, he has had another job.
What
he
was
was
it?
A community organizer. Then he was the mayor.
Bro, my mom was a community organizer. She went around and knocked on doors and hung shit for fucking Joe Lieberman back in the 80s.
He marched on D.C. with Martin Luther King. He was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont.
I guess what I mean is he's not had a job outside politics.
He's not had a job outside of policy. And he has, but the thing is, with a history like that, you can look at someone's history and say, have they done things that are populist? You can look at Joe Biden right now, and there are so many reasons not to vote for Joe Biden because of his policies. Not policies that I think disqualify him against his current contender, but you look at his policies and you go, you were instrumental in the silencing of the people who were outspoken about. I'm blanking on the Supreme Court justice's name, who had some sexual assault allegations similar to Kavanaugh. Clarence Thomas, and you were instrumental in the authorship of bills that prevented college loan recipients from declaring bankruptcy, from getting out of it, and you were instrumental in the Tough on Crime Acts, which disproportionately affected Black communities. And you can say that. And those are great reasons to not vote for Joe Biden. They were great reasons not to vote for Joe Biden in the primary to anyone who voted for him in the primary. But when you look at Bernie's history, through 30 years in Congress and all the years before that in public policy, when it wasn't popular, civil rights in the 60s, when it very much was not popular, he's been on the right side of history 100% of the time.
Well, let me ask you this question, because this is what I kind of think, like, based on, I have one of the best dudes you'll ever know in your life is a friend of mine, and he's in law enforcement. And I kind of think this based on conversations with him. He's a little bit more right-leaning, and he'll even tell you this. And I think this about politicians. There's got to be a cap. 10 years. Like,
of course.
As a cop or as a politician, like, or really as anything, like, I've been teaching jiu-jitsu now forever. And it's like, if I didn't have young guys coming in challenging me and like trying to like smash my face, I'd be doing the same shit I was doing like 10, 15 years ago. But these guys, like politicians, cops, after 10 years, they get numb to situations. I'm reading a great book right now called Range by David Epstein, who wrote Sports Gene, that's one of the greatest books I've ever read. And it talks about like being a generalist as opposed to being a specialist. And basically it's like you need to have transferable skills. You can't be so like have such tunnel vision because you've been doing the same thing for so long, because subconsciously you start to eliminate outside explanations and you start to believe your own shit. You basically become your own echo chamber. And I think that for police officers on the street, anyone who has to make snap decisions, or politicians who are there too long, like, we need to cap these things. And we need to say, hey, man, you've been in Congress for 5 2-year terms, or 2 5-year terms, or 3 3-year terms. I know that makes 9. Whatever it is, like, we got to rotate you out. We got to get some fresh blood in, because the world has changed. And right now what we have in politics is a bunch of motherfuckers who don't have any, like, they're so detached from what's going on right now in the world. And I say this all the time. The problem with our leadership right now is that none of them have ever been leaders.
I completely agree on the term limits. I mean, you know, when asked about term limits, Mitch McConnell, who's the majority leader of the Senate right now, he said we do have term limits. We have elections, and he is an asshole. But what I think is what is an easy solution is you get 3 years in the House, you get 3 sessions in the House, you get 2 sessions in the Senate. That is, if you do 3 terms in the House followed by 2 sessions in the Senate, that is straight up 18 years. If you cannot get things done in 18 years in Congress, you're a fucking idiot.
That's a great idea.
But that's plenty of time to be in federal government. I think that more so than we should have a 25-year age restriction on the House and a 30-year age restriction on the Senate and a 35-year age restriction on the presidency. I think that they should have restrictions on being in non-policy facing roles. So you don't get to be in government affairs at Lockheed Martin and then go into a job in Congress or run for Congress afterwards when you already have got those attentions.
You got to vote on shit. These motherfuckers are absentee all the time. Every one of these cocksuckers on both sides of the aisle.
I think you just set a cap. You say, hey, if you vote over 10% of your votes absentee, or you fail to vote on if you fail to show up for work 5 to 10% of the time, you're fired. So if you fail to show up at my company less than 5%, I will fire you. And so why the fuck can people just not show up for votes or just not go on the record?
Are you involved? Are you aware enough to form an opinion on Dan Crenshaw?
I don't know who Dan Crenshaw is.
I think he's a senator or congressman from Texas. He's got the eye patch. They fucked with him on Saturday Night Live a little bit. I mean, I like him to the point where he's so reasonable and calm in his approach to things. I think right now, as a Republican, because you only have 2 choices, Republican or Democrat, I think he's a little bit like hugging the party line a little bit too much. But I mean, he's a reasonable dude. He was a Navy SEAL. He lost his eye in combat. And I really like a lot of the shit that he says. And what I think is, I know there's a lot of people. There's some stupid Facebook movement talking about fucking Jocko and The Rock 2020. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Kanye, Elon 2020.
Yeah. What I would say is Crenshaw Gabbard 2020. 2 people who have served in the military. They've got different policies, foreign policies and domestic policies. And, you know, it's like anyone else. You get into office and you figure a lot of it out based on who you surround yourself with. It's like think about this. Think about Jiu-Jitsu. Think about MMA. No one person can teach you all of it. No one person can be excellent at all of it. You've got to pick the things you know about and excel there, and then bring in a support staff to help you with the other things. And I mean, right now, obviously, as someone who served in the military, I favor people who served in the military, but I mean, I think that the Democratic Party did a disservice to her just in the beginning. Who knows if she would have made it to the final debates, but the fact that she tortured Kamala early on in the beginning, who I think the Democrats thought was like one of their darlings, I think that they kind of buried her, and you know that it's all about money. So anyway, switching gears. Answer this any way you want to. And don't ask for clarification. Who's your favorite artist?
The Pixies.
The Pixies are your favorite artist. Well,
no doubt.
Interesting.
If I think about the amount of time that I spend appreciating the art of any artist, it's got to be the Pixies. So when I think about I immediately went to music because that's the only art that I give a shit about. Like, I care about visual arts.
It's the only art we can really name. People who aren't into visual art, like most people are exposed to musical art on a regular basis. We're not exposed to visual art, and so we can't name people.
It's true. So I was in I was in a band when I was in high school and into college, and the guys in the band got me into alternative rock and into the idea of, like, up until that point I had never even thought of the idea that you could be different in music. And the Pixies may have a nostalgia factor to me because they were the first band that I got into for that. Like, I already knew about Nirvana, and grunge rock seemed like a thing that it wasn't nearly as like protest rock at that point in my life, right? Because it had already happened. But, the Pixies were just a band to me that, they're just completely different. They just didn't. They clearly didn't give a fuck. Like, there's a video of them doing a concert. I remember in the UK where Francis, who's their Black Francis, who's their lead singer.
They're from here. They're
player.
from Boston, right?
Yeah. So they formed at UMass. Francis and Black Francis, their lead singer, and their guitarist Joey. Formed the band at UMass in their dorm, and then they recruited Kim Deal, who was their bass player, from a Help Wanted ad, and then they, found Lovering, who's their their drummer.
Chick bass players, they're just something special,
Dude, I proposed to Kim Deal when I was 18 years old at a Pixie show, the last Pixie show that Kim played at. She definitely didn't respond to me.
And what band did she go on? Did she do Letters to Cleo?
She founded the Breeders.
The Breeders.
Yeah, with her sister.
Cannonball.
Yeah, Cannonball. Bigger success than any Pixie song ever. Which
except maybe Wave of Mutilation was on 120 minutes all the time.
Yeah, but Where's My Mind is the closing song of Fight Club. But in terms of Billboard, Cannonball's more successful. But the last tour they went on, which was as the Pixies before Kim quit the band fully, and they recruited this woman named Paz, who was the bassist in A Perfect Circle, I think. And she now is the main bassist of the Pixies, and they've put out new albums, which are also good if you like that style of music. But they when I got into the Pixies, it was like jiu-jitsu. Like, I don't know. I think I'll always love jiu-jitsu, even if 90% of America did jiu-jitsu. But there is something about the music when you're a teenager where you're like, fuck, this is amazing. And then you're like, why doesn't everyone else know about this? And it's like a secret that you're in on.
Yeah, and it's like, it depends on what point in your life it hits.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm something of a bass player myself.
I've heard.
But when I tell people that my favorite bands are The Replacements and Jane's Addiction, like, people are like, oh yeah, those are cool bands. They're not my favorite bands, but it's like, dude, if you were doing what I was doing when I discovered those bands, they might be your favorite bands.
There's an element of nostalgia to all music, right?
Totally. Associative property.
And it actually doesn't matter. And I'm wondering what's going to happen with Gen Z and their music, because...
Who the fuck is Gen Z? How old are those little suckers?
I think the oldest are like 24. I think that's the youngest millennials.
Do they even know what music is? Or is it all like trap music
and
all
like TikTok? But they actually probably may be the most musically sophisticated generation for their age, because they have all music at all times. Like, my generation had the iPod when we were in high school. Like, we had the iPod, we had 1,000 songs in our wallet, but we probably just filled it with like Taking Back Sunday and shit. And that's what I did for sure. But they have Spotify. They can discover things. They have Pandora. They can figure out and discover all sorts of new types of music. They'll have their generation's music, and they'll have small artists, which are now able to be supported by these platforms. But they'll also be able to listen back and be able to be like, I'm nostalgic. Like, I have a nostalgia feeling about the Beatles, even though I was never alive while the Beatles were around, because the Beatles came into my life when I was like 15.
But don't you think that like kids now who have all these streaming services and access to this music, yeah, they've got music at the ready, but they've got their favorite songs at the ready. Like when I was driving around in my fucking Mercury Topaz and like pushing cassette tapes in and out, like I had to listen to track 3 to get to track 4. And track 3 might have become my personal favorite track. But nowadays, like there is no track 3 that someone can secretly uncover. Everyone just puts out track 4, the most radio edit ready, the most like pop ready track there is. Like we could open that drawer right over there, dude, and we could play the Siamese Dream like first press album, and we can rock out until whenever. But like there are songs on there that on that album, on that, like of course that's on vinyl, but on tape. And again, we're different generations. If that were on tape, I might have found a different favorite song on that album than you did, because I had to press through an actual cassette recording, whereas these guys are just skipping those fucking songs on Spotify. You're not getting the album experience. There's no concept album.
I think actually the exact opposite, because you have to think about the fact that you had a gating mechanism that you didn't know you were subject to, which was whoever decided that they got a cassette or an album made a decision about whether or not you got to hear it. Now, that doesn't matter. You want to make a sound that's just like 27 minutes of you farting into a microphone, like that gets to be distributed.
But sometimes you need to be exposed to things you're not ready to be exposed to, like, and you can still appreciate them.
And how many artists through time honestly did that? How many artists through time honestly got famous and then used their platform to be like, and motherfuckers, Strawberry Fields?
No, I don't think that's the case. But if we go back to the idea we were talking about earlier, which is like people, confirmation bias and echo chambers, it's like when I was a kid, let's just take an album that I had on vinyl, and let's just say like, I don't remember the order of the songs, Slippery When Wet, Bon Jovi. Like I wanted to hear Living on a Prayer, but you had to go through the other songs and you actually had to be exposed to different ideas in different songs. Whereas now, like all I have to do is confirm the thing that I already like, and I could just get Living on a Prayer 100 times, and I might miss an idea, a song, or a riff, or whatever that might resonate with me in a different way because of technology. I want to suffer through the process a little bit at least to get there.
I think you're talking about a problem that came when CDs arrived more than you're talking about a problem that is inherent to streaming, because I think that when CDs arrived, you're talking exactly like you're actually nailing exactly what happened.
100%.
In the late 90s to the early 2000s, you saw exactly that. Like people got so obsessed with hit songs that stupid fucking company Hit Clips came out. Do you remember this shit?
Yeah.
Like Hit Clips, which was like a thumb drive that played 20 seconds of a shit ass song. It was like, hit me baby one more time, and then like that's all
a
played.
great song
like
though.
Yeah, oh, it's a great music
Great video.
It's a great music video with the volume turned off, but like
No, I really like it.
yeah, I like it with the volume turned off, alone in my house, was by myself.
I want the volume up.
So but the thing is, like, we got obsessed with the idea of hits, and MTV pivoted from saying we're gonna play music to we're gonna play new music, we're gonna play music videos, we're gonna expose you to we're gonna play the hits. We're gonna play the hits, and every radio station transitioned to it. We're gonna play the hits. Everyone got obsessed with the hits when the CD came out. In streaming, yeah, like we're gonna be limited to only listening to songs we like. But the amount of money output, like, you don't have, if you pay Spotify $0, you can go off and still find new music. And if you pay Spotify $4.99 or whatever, the student price, you can go and, yeah, me too. My M.I.T. email address.
I got the Duo though. I think I pay like $19. I got like 2 different accounts. I don't want the guys at the gym like I don't want them knowing that I'm listening to Taylor Swift.
No, you listen to Taylor Swift, all right? You're getting judged over here too.
Girl can write a good lick.
But you got to think about it, like, people are able to listen to more music, and that will lead to a higher amount of diversity of songs.
Diversity of artists, not diversity of songs, probably, because I would guess, without doing any studies, that the song selection is similar across artists by people who can just sit there and like pick different songs. Whereas I think that if you do it in a different manner and you choose, I don't know, dude. Listen,
let's look at Lil Nas X.
Let's do this. Let's go down the street to the Tam, get a shot of tequila. We've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes.
All right.
Let's wrap it up. JB, thanks, my man. I'm going to do the outro in a little bit. I don't even really know why I'm talking anymore. But let's go down. Let's go get some tequila.
All right. I'm in.
Giddy up. Dude, I thought that was awesome.
All right. Awesome.
That's it for us, everybody. Thanks, as always, to our guests for coming down to Podcast Alley and spending a few minutes with us shooting the shit. Don't forget to click the subscribe button so you get this intel as fast as we do. Good night, everybody.